There is a new detail in the Nolan Wells case, and it did not come from the county coroner. It came from a second doctor brought in independently by the family, and what he found, or more accurately what he could not rule out, has changed the tone of this entire investigation. This video discusses an active, unresolved investigation. No cause of death has been officially confirmed and no one has been charged with a crime. Everything you're about to hear is drawn directly from the independent pathologist report and public statements made by the family's attorney. You already know the outline of what happened to Nolan Wells. A holiday boat trip to Horn Island, a group of friends, a young man who never made it back. What you may not know is what happened after. After the first autopsy, after the first official statement that there were no signs of foul play, and after the Wells family decided that wasn't going to be the end of the story. Horn Island itself is a remote, undeveloped barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, only reachable by boat, with no permanent residence and limited cell coverage once you're out there. It's the kind of place people go precisely because it feels cut off from everything, which is part of why the timeline of that 4th of July trip has been so difficult to pin down, and why so many basic questions about what happened on that island are still unanswered weeks later. When Jackson County's coroner's office completed its initial examination, officials publicly indicated they did not suspect a crime. For a family desperate for answers, that conclusion did not sit right. So they did what a growing number of families in high-profile cases have started doing. They brought in their own expert. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, arranged for a second independent autopsy. That exam was carried out on July 10th by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., a board-certified forensic pathologist and the president of the National Medical Association. Before we go further, if you're just finding this channel, consider subscribing so you don't miss how this story develops, because it is far from over. And wherever you're watching from, drop a comment below and let us know your location. It's always interesting to see how far a story like this one is reaching. Now, back to what Dr. Mitchell actually found. On July 19th, at a news conference held in Chicago during the NAACP National Convention, Ben Crump stood in front of cameras and read directly from Mitchell's report. And the language in that report was careful, clinical, and deliberately non-committal. Because Mitchell said he ran into obstacles almost immediately. For one, there was no toxicology data included in his review. That means no answers at this stage about anything that may or may not have been in Wells' system at the time of his death. For another, portions of Wells' throat were not available for him to examine. That detail matters more than it might sound like on the surface, because it meant Mitchell could not rule out or rule in any kind of injury to the neck as a possible contributing factor. And on top of that, the body had decomposed enough by the time of the second exam that it was difficult to determine whether there had been bruising or abrasions on the skin. But there was one finding that stood out from the rest, and it's the detail that has driven most of the conversations since. Mitchell noted a discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Wells's head, in what's called the occipital region, essentially the lower back portion of the skull. Now, to be precise, and this is important, there was no skull fracture found in that area and no laceration to the skin, just discoloration in the tissue underneath. Crump, reading from the report, put it plainly. He said this pathologist cannot rule out whether any intervening, non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death of Nolan Wells. In other words, foul play has not been eliminated as a possibility. That single line is the reason this case entered a new phase. But here's where it gets more complicated, and where you need to hear both sides, because a responsible look at this case means not stopping at the first expert opinion. Fox News reached out separately to another forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who has no connection to this case or to the Wells family. Baden was shown the same information about the head injury, and his read on it was very different. He said the injury he was being described did not, in his opinion, point toward foul play. He suggested it was more consistent with the kind of superficial impact you'd expect from a body coming into contact with debris in the water. Something that, in his words, could have happened either before or after death. He was clear that it described a relatively minor surface-level impact, not the kind of trauma typically associated with a deliberate attack. So now you have two credentialed forensic pathologists looking at overlapping information and landing in two very different places. One says he cannot rule out foul play. The other says the injury in question doesn't look like foul play to him. That tension, not a definitive answer, is exactly where this case currently sits. It's worth pointing out that these two doctors are not operating with the same access. Mitchell physically examined Wells' body on July 10th, working with the limitations we just described. No toxicology, missing portions of the throat, and a body that had already begun decomposing. Barden, on the other hand, was reacting to a description of the findings relayed to him by a news outlet, not conducting his own hands-on examination. That doesn't make either opinion invalid, but it is a distinction worth understanding as this story continues to unfold and more voices weigh in. And that tension is compounded by everything Mitchell says he still doesn't know. He was direct about this in his findings. He does not know what condition Wells' body was actually in when it first came out of the water, because he wasn't the one who saw it first. The county medical examiner was. He does not know whether Wells was conscious or unconscious at the moment he entered the water, and he does not know whether Wells entered that water forced or on his own. Mitchell was explicit that each of those unknowns would be significant to determining what actually happened. Right now, none of them have answers. There's another layer here that's been part of the public conversation from the beginning, and it hasn't gone away. Wells' friends left Horn Island without him. They took his phone and his keys with them, and they did not report him missing to police. Investigators in the early days of this case made public statements suggesting they didn't suspect criminal activity. Statements that, in hindsight, a lot of people believe were made too quickly, before a full picture had even been established. Since the independent autopsy findings were released, the emotional weight of this case has only grown. Wells was laid to rest on July 20th in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Hundreds of people came out for his funeral. During the eulogy, Reverend Al Sharpton stood up and announced a $50,000 reward funded through the National Action Network for anyone who can provide information leading to an arrest and a conviction in this case. That's not a reward you offer for an accident. It's a reward that signals an organization believes there is more to uncover, and that someone, somewhere, may already know something they haven't said. As of right now, the official state autopsy, the one being conducted through Jackson County, still has not been completed. Officials have said they're waiting on toxicology results before finalizing that report. Until that comes back, and until more of these gaps get filled in, the manner and cause of Nolan Wells' death remain officially undetermined. That word, undetermined, is doing a lot of work in this case. It's not a confirmation of foul play. It's not a confirmation of an accident. It's an acknowledgement from a trained professional that the evidence available right now simply does not point clearly enough in either direction. And for a family that's already buried their son, that kind of uncertainty is its own form of pain. We'll be watching this one closely, the toxicology results, the completed state autopsy, and whatever comes out of the investigation from here. If there's a development, we'll bring it to you. Before you go, a final and important note. Nothing in this video should be taken as a confirmed account of how Nolan Wells died. No official cause or manner of death has been determined by the state. No individual has been named a suspect, and no charges have been filed against anyone in connection with his death. This remains an open, active investigation, and the information here reflects only what has been made public so far by the independent pathologist report and statements from the family's legal team. If you want to stay updated as this case moves forward, subscribing is the best way to make sure you don't miss it.